You remember her without remembering her, a shadow that never spoke, yet judged you every time you didn't move, not with words, with the tilt of her head, the delay in her breath, the silence after your promise. You never touched her, but you felt her slipping, and it wasn't another man. It was you, or rather, the version of you she waited to see, the one you kept postponing, editing, praying would arrive in time. But time is cruel when it belongs to the soul of a woman. She waits, yes, but she tests while waiting. She sharpens her absence like a blade, not to wound, but to see if you still bleed. You call it mixed signals. She calls it truth under pressure. Every delay you dressed up as virtue, she read as fear dressed in ritual. She offered you the stage, and you wrote her out of the play, but the curtains never closed. She stayed in the wings, watching, not to forgive, but to see if you would dare step forward without knowing the script. And now, you feel the judgment not of her voice, but of the silence she left behind. You waited because it felt safer than choosing. You thought stillness was strength, but it was only the pose of a man trying not to be seen, choosing nothing. And in that pause, in that careful calculation, you forgot that every hesitation speaks. She heard it before you spoke. The words you choked on, the futures you rehearsed but never embodied, the love you promised later when things were more certain, more clear, more convenient. But she never wanted convenience. She wanted presence. You gave her thought instead, and thought slow, tangled. Trembling thought is not love. It is fear with a vocabulary. You called it timing. She called it waiting. You called it protection. She called it evasion. You called it being careful. She called it cowardice. You thought the world would reward your prudence. But women are not clocks. They do not wait for gears to align. They test the soul in the moment it beats. She watched you check the horizon for signs. She watched you stare at your own reflection for too long, hoping to find the courage inside the mirror. But mirrors don't create men. They only expose what the light fails to disguise. Do you remember the night she asked you nothing? That was the night she asked the most. Not in words, but in presence, in the way she stood before you, still, without reaching, in the way her eyes didn't plead anymore. You thought her silence was a softness, but silence in a woman is a question without grace. It demands without announcing itself. And you blinked too slowly. You delayed your answer by just enough heartbeats to turn a question into a verdict. She did not leave in anger. That would have made her smaller. No, she left like mist slipping out of a closed fist. You thought you were still holding her, but you were holding memory, and memory is warm for just long enough to trick the lonely into believing they are not alone. What hurt was not her absence, but your own. You could not meet her gaze, not because you did not love her, but because love terrified you. Real love does not wait to be convenient. It interrupts. It humiliates the ego. It exposes the unfinished self. And so you waited for a sign, for certainty, for safety. But the man who waits for signs becomes addicted to shadows. You mistook her questions for traps, her intensity for imbalance, her depth for danger. But she was not testing your patience. She was testing your presence. She wanted to know if the man in front of her was a man or a theory of one. She gave you chances, not the kind you count, but the kind that slip between gestures, a hesitation in her laughter, a glance that lasted a second too long, a brush of her hand that asked, wordlessly, "Are you here, or just performing here?" You were performing for yourself. Most of all, you wanted her to see you as strong, as principled, as someone who does not rush into desire. But what she saw was a man more in love with his delay than with her. A man more concerned with choosing the right path than walking any of them. A man who feared sin more then he desired truth. And so she waited, she tested, not out of cruelty but out of clarity, because a woman must know what kind of fire she stands beside. Is it warmth or is it smoke? And what did you offer? A pause, an apology wrapped in philosophy, a plan, a someday. But someday is a word only men believe in. Women believe in the now, not because they are impatient, but because they are woven into the fabric of mortality more intimately than you'll ever understand. They bleed with the moon. They carry futures in their bodies. They know that the present is already dying, and that to postpone truth is to let it rot. She tested you because she wanted to believe that the man who hesitated could still become the man who acted, that the man who feared loss might still choose love, that the one who built altars to ideals could still kneel before what was real. But you mistook her tests for punishments. You called her impossible, unclear, unstable, but clarity was never her duty. Choosing was yours. And you, the man who waited, failed not because you lacked time, but because you loved your distance more than you feared losing her. You thought you were respecting her pace, but it was never her pace that slowed you. It was your dread, the quiet gnawing fear that love would ask you to surrender something you hadn't yet named. Your freedom, your ambition, your solitude, or worse, your illusion of control. You didn't fear her, you feared the you that would be revealed in her presence. She held up a mirror. You flinched, and she, seeing that, knew she could not be loved by a man who loved his mask more than her truth. And so she tested. She pulled back, not to punish, but to see. Would you follow without being led? Would you speak without being cued? Would you stand, finally, without the approval of your 1,000 inner voices? And when you didn't, when you paused again, and again, and again, she stepped away. Not in hate, in recognition that you were still at war with yourself. And a man at war with himself cannot protect anything, not even the woman who reached out to him. You blame her, quietly. In corners of your mind you never speak aloud. You say she moved too fast, that she expected too much, that she didn't understand your depth. But you are not deep. You are uncertain, and uncertainty is not depth. It is paralysis in disguise. You are a man with his foot hovering over the threshold, forever rehearsing the step, never crossing. And she was the door, wide open, waiting, waiting, until she wasn't. And now, you write messages you do not send. You replay words you never said. You rehearse futures that never arrived. She tests you still, not with her presence, but with the echo of what your delay created. A woman who tests a man is not cruel. She is honest. She reveals whether his promise is a veil or a vow. And in your case, it was a veil. Thin, beautiful, trembling in the wind, but not enough to clothe a soul. She held the mirror. You looked, but you looked too long. And looking too long is another way of saying you refuse to see. Because to see her would have required you to see yourself. Not the version you polished, the version you avoid, the trembling, waiting, wanting man who calls delay devotion. She loved that man once, but she could not wait for him forever. And now, she does not need to test you anymore. You became your own test, and you failed. Not because you didn't know the answer, but because you didn't dare to speak it aloud. You thought she vanished, but it is not disappearance that unsettles you, it is what remains in her place. That stillness, that sacred absence, that void shaped precisely like the choice you never made. She didn't scream, she didn't demand, she became elusive. You say she gave you no answer, but you are mistaken. Silence is not absence of voice. It is the voice that no longer bends to your need for confirmation. You are now in the trial, but no one speaks. No verdict is read. You are judged by what you do with the unspoken. She has not closed the door. She has simply stopped holding it open, and now you must face yourself in her silence. You once prayed for signs, but now you are surrounded by them. She delays her reply not to punish, but to see whether your faith is in her or in the idea of her. She does not soothe you anymore, because she is not your comfort. She is your consequence. You wanted her warmth without risking your fear. You wanted her devotion without offering your surrender. And so she waits, not passively, but in divine protest. This is the trial. No man escapes the trial of the invisible God. When the beloved becomes a question, and you must answer without knowing if she still listens. She is no longer a presence that explains. She has become a mystery that watches, and you beg for clues. You scan her words, her gestures, her timings. But the more you search, the more you discover she has become symbolic, mythic, not because she is playing games, but because your inactions summoned her into archetype. She now speaks in absences, in withheld hands, in unpredictability. She has become the unknown you never had the courage to face in yourself. You thought love would announce itself with clarity, but love, real love, is indistinguishable from judgment. And now, she judges you without anger. She simply becomes the silence in which your character reveals itself. You call it withdrawal, but it is you who disappeared first the day you chose caution over courage, the day you became more afraid of losing your mask than losing her. She felt it, not with logic, but with the instinct of the soul. A woman does not need reasons to know when she is no longer believed in. She only needs breath. Now, every moment she does not call, you feel a pressure build, a strange gravity, as if the universe is slowly removing your illusions one by one. You try to distract yourself, work, noise, philosophy, prayer, but her silence follows you like a ghost with your voice. You see her in other faces, hear her in other names, but none of them test you like she did, because she did not want the version of you that you crafted. She wanted the one you buried. And when she stopped asking, you finally understood that her testing wasn't cruelty, it was a mirror of your potential, a test of whether you would rise or retreat. She waits still, but no longer for you. She waits to see if the man you claim to be will ever arrive, not in words, not in longing, but in presence. You have mistaken her silence for distance, but it is not distance. It is the holy silence of the one who no longer intervenes. Like a god who stops parting seas, like a lover who refuses to repeat herself. She is no longer your teacher. She has become your test. And how do you respond with delay, with overthinking, with shadow boxing the past? You rehearse 1,000 confessions you never send. You wait for signs that you are forgiven. But she never condemned you, only stepped back to see who you truly are without her pull. And what are you, a man still afraid to choose, still hoping that if you wait long enough, the risk will soften, still praying that love will return on safer terms. But love does not negotiate with delay. Love is a thief of comfort. It does not knock. It demands. You say you would act now that you've changed, that you understand. But you do not understand. You still want proof before devotion. You still wait for her to blink first. You want her to return so that you can finally commit. But she is not returning. Not because she hates you, but because she has become the question itself. And questions do not walk toward you. They surround you. They strip you. They press upon your soul until you either stand or vanish. You are no longer in a relationship. You are in a courtroom of the soul. She is the question. You are the accused. And the jury is your own conscience. You plead with yourself. You say, I was scared. I wasn't ready. I didn't know. But the silence does not accept excuses. It only waits for truth. And the truth is, you never feared losing her. You feared becoming the man her love required. You feared sacrifice. You feared exposure. You feared judgment. And now you live in judgment. You think she wanted perfection. She didn't. She wanted clarity, a choice, a presence. She wanted to know that when she reached for you, she touched someone real. Not a concept, not a projection, not a promise wrapped in later. She tested you not to see if you were good, but to see if you were true. And now you sit in the aftermath of that test, still wondering if she's watching. She is, but not with eyes, with absence. She watches you through the hole you left in her soul. Every man who delays learns this, that women do not rage forever. At some point, they vanish into mystery, and from that place, they ask questions you cannot escape. Who are you without the fear? Who are you when no one waits? Who are you when the test has ended, but you still feel judged? You wander the ruins of a love you never dared to live in, and you pretend you are searching for her. But you are only searching for yourself, the version of you who might have acted had he not feared the God in her gaze. Because that's what it was, wasn't it? A sacred gaze, one that asked for all of you, one that made mediocrity impossible, one that made comfort feel like betrayal. She looked at you like you were capable of becoming, and you, unsure, ran. You said, "Let me think." She said nothing, and in that nothing, everything was revealed. Now you speak to her absence more than you ever spoke to her presence. You draft letters to the silence. You speak to your reflection, hoping it might echo something she would have believed. You hold her ghost tighter than you ever held her hand. You pray, not to win her back, but to be someone who could have deserved her. And still, you do not choose. You dream of choosing. You imagine choosing, but you do not stand up. You do not cross the silence. You do not risk the invisible trial, because you suspect what the verdict might be, that she has moved past questions, that her test is over, and your delay eternal. You built a cathedral out of not yet. Every stone was a postponed confession, every window a dream you stared through instead of acting upon. And as you knelt inside, rehearsing your devotion, you mistook stillness for virtue, but stillness, when born of dread, is not holy. It is cowardice, disguised as contemplation. You prayed for a sign, not knowing the sign had already come and left. Her gaze was the altar, her voice, the hymn, her waiting, the sacrament. But you wanted a God that arrived on your terms, at your pace. And when she became the unanswered question, you turned your silence into religion. This is what men like you do. You canonize the delay. You polish the inaction until it shines like gold. You speak of fate, of wounds, of timing, of healing, as if love were a strategy instead of a sacrifice. You say you were building a life, but you were only fortifying your fear. You were never building something to share, only something to hide behind. She knocked, and instead of opening, you looked for a better answer. But questions of the soul are not solved. They are suffered, and you refused to suffer. So you postponed. Postponement became habit. Habit became identity. And then she left, not with fury, but with a silence so complete it became sacred. You call her absence tragic, but it was you who crucified presence. She offered herself in the raw terror of now. You responded with the sermon of someday. She tested your soul by being fully alive. You responded by rehearsing hypotheticals. The man who waits imagines he is waiting for the right moment. But the right moment was the one you didn't recognize because it wasn't wrapped in certainty. It came wrapped in risk, wrapped in her. and risk, to you, was blasphemy. Now, you kneel in the ruins of your cathedral, asking the silence to speak. But silence only echoes what you didn't say. You light candles for a future that will not return. You wear grief like a robe. But grief is not repentance. It is memory without movement. You still speak of love as though it might return. But love, when tested and abandoned, does not circle back like a loyal pet. It becomes myth. It becomes story. It becomes her beyond reach. Not out of malice, but out of mercy. And yet, you still wait, as if waiting could sanctify you, as if she might peer through the veil again and see you differently. But she saw you clearly the first time. That was the test. She offered chaos. She offered mystery. She offered the terrifying purity of being seen. And you chose control. You bowed before your doubt. You worshipped the comfort of indecision. You became the priest of your own postponement. And now, no woman will ever test you like she did, because no woman will ever believe you could pass. That was her faith, to believe there was something beneath your restraint, something that burned, something that dared, something unfinished, but not unwilling. And when she tested, she did not expect perfection. She expected presence, the kind that breaks routine, the kind that terrifies even you, the kind that acts even when it stammers. But you wanted the test without the risk of failure. You wanted a love that asked nothing irreversible of you. But all real love is irreversible. That is what makes it divine. You remember the night she walked away, not with tears, not with pleas, but with a quiet that dismantled you. It was then you knew she would never beg you to become. She would only leave the door ajar. Once, and that door is now stone. You press your hand against it. You tell yourself stories of who you are now, that you've grown, that you've learned, that you would choose differently. But the door is not listening. The test was not about what you might become. It was about what you chose when it mattered. You wonder if she thinks of you, if the silence aches for her too. But her silence is not your mirror. Her silence is her escape. From the man who mistook hesitation for depth. From the one who admired love more than he could live it. From the ghost who waited so long to become real. She had to grieve someone who never arrived. She was not asking for eternity. She was asking for now. She was not asking for security. She was asking for surrender. She was not asking for everything. She was asking for you. Not your ideas. Not your future. Not your theory of manhood. You. And you refused her. With good intentions. With well-meaning delay. With philosophical detachment. But refusal wrapped in kindness is still refusal. And so you built a church around your choice. You made her absence sacred so you could avoid the shame. You turned her test into a parable because it hurts less than admitting you failed. And now you speak of her with reverence, as if reverence were enough. But reverence without action is just regret dressed in holy robes. Do you see it now? The woman who tests is not cruel. She is divine. She is the flame placed in front of the coward to see if he becomes man or myth. You chose myth. You became an echo, and echoes cannot touch. They can only haunt. She does not hate you, but she no longer believes. And belief, once broken, does not return with better timing. It must be earned in the moment it is asked for, not in the moment it is missed. You tell yourself you are protecting her from yourself, from failure, from the unknown. But no woman needs that kind of protection. What she needed was risk. A man who would tremble and still choose, who would burn and still speak, who would see his doubt and still step forward. She did not test you because she was unsure. She tested you because she saw what you denied, that you were standing on the threshold of your life, waiting for someone to carry you across. But no one carries a man. He either walks or he remains. You remained. And now, you romanticize what you never touched. You eulogize what you never held. You turn her into poetry because you cannot bear the prose of your own delay. You look at other women and wonder why it never feels the same. It never will. Because no one else offered you the altar. No one else dared to ask everything. And you refused everything for the sake of maybe. She tested you, not to trap you, but to see if you were real, and you were not. You were almost, and almost, to a woman who sees clearly, is the same as never. So now you build your sermons, you write your monologues, you stare into mirrors hoping to glimpse the man she once believed in, but mirrors lie to the man who waits. They tell him he still has time, but time is the first lover to leave. And in her place, there is only the question, the one she whispered. Once, long ago, when she still hoped, will you move, or will you watch, you watched. And that is the truth you kneel before now. Somewhere, she stands at a place you cannot find. No address, no answer, only the soft sound of footsteps that do not return. You hear her in the click of a door that never opens. You feel her in the weight of choices unopened, not as punishment, as presence. And the silence does not scream. It waits, still, not for you, for the echo of what you could have been. Had you not loved the waiting more than the woman? You once asked why she tested you. Now you understand. She wanted to know if the man she loved was real, or only rehearsing. You never answered. And now, there is no question left to ask.